Welcome to the Mom as Well podcast, where we are digging deep into the gifts and the gaps of foster and adoptive parenting. I'm Tara Hutton, and I'm glad you're here. Mama's Well. Yes, she is. Well, we're on another Zoom call. This is, I always get the technology piece makes me nervous, but we are making it through and I'm learning so much. So I'm excited about my guest today, and there was no way to get him into the studio, even though he says he loves the Lone Star State. He is in Florida, and I am a little nervous because he has quite a resume. He's, this is before I introduce, I want to just let you know that this man has been the father to 60 children in foster care. He has, I believe, we'll get him to tell us this for sure, but I think he has 10 children that are in his family or living with him at this point, him and his wife. He is a TEDx talk speaker. He is a leading expert in foster care and parenting, the director of the Foster Care Institute. He conducts seminars. He's written books, all kinds of articles published, appeared on CNN, HLN, Good Morning America, ABC, CBS, Fox, NBC, and all kinds of other places. And, well, there's another thing that I found really interesting, but I'm going to save it till the end. Welcome, Dr. John DeGarmo.
Hello, thank you for having me program.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining.
My pleasure.
So to kick us off, like that was a really formal introduction, but I watched your TEDx talk and it was heartwarming, to say the least. So would you just introduce yourself and how you got started into the foster care world and adoption world and all of that? Will you just kind of take us back as far as you feel like you'd like to go and tell us a little bit about your family and your history?
Yeah, sure. And I must be honest, it was something I never planned on doing. It was something I never envisioned for myself. I never thought I would be a foster parent, an adoptive parent. In fact, I didn't want to. I just, it wasn't on my radar. I believed so many of the myths and misconceptions that are associated with foster care, with adoption, with children in crisis. I believed that. It really wasn't until the death of our first child, and while we were living in Australia, my wife's from Australia, and our death of our first child that got me to really recognize the miracle that is birth. So at some point, we moved back to the United States from Australia, and I was teaching in a rural school setting. And I noticed a lot of kids coming through my classroom who had issues of attendance, behavior, academics. And I kept asking, what is going on? Why there's so many in this small, rural, poverty-stricken area? And then I started meeting a lot of their birth parents. And I recognized, yeah, it starts in the home. It really starts in the home. So that led to a discussion of how can my wife and I help these children. We had lost our first child. We had 3 healthy children later on. How can we help those kids who are in need, those kids who are suffering, those kids who are in crisis? Can we bring them into our home? And that led to foster parenting. That led to the adoption of 3 from the foster care system, 4 failed adoptions. I led to the doctorate in foster care. And, since then I've really devoted my life. And in fact, I'm driven each day to make the system a better one, not only for the children, but for the foster parents, the birth parents, for all members of society. And also to bring awareness of what foster care really is all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's Foster Care Awareness Month. So how appropriate is this?
Yes, right.
Yeah, so I think that you could help us to raise some awareness in a lot of different areas. One of the things that we talked about is just the, being aware of the mental health of our kids in care, because they have experienced so much trauma. Right. So talk to us a little bit about what's been your experience with, you don't need to get into stories of your own children, or just kind of what is your experience with that? I know that you have loads of information.
Well, a lot of people say to me, and so many foster parents, these kids really must be happy to be in your home. And that's the farthest thing from the truth. I used to believe that too. Oh boy, I thought that. When I went through foster parent training, like so many others, my wife and I had 3 kids. We had college degrees. I was teaching in a school setting. My wife had a degree in psychology. I thought I was ready. I thought I was ready for these kids to come to my home. I recognized within my first placement, within 20 minutes, that, oh my gosh, I am not prepared for this. Here's the truth. You can put aside all of the abuse, the anxiety, the neglect, the abandonment, all those issues, the trauma the child's faced before being placed in a home. It is traumatic being placed into a foster care environment. I can provide all the stability, all the structure, all the unconditional love that my wife and I give these kids. We can provide all of that. But at the end of the day, these kids are scared. They're afraid. We're not their family members. We're not their parents. They're asking questions when they're placed into our home, in any foster home. They're asking questions like, why am I here? What did I do wrong? Did my mom not love me anymore? Will I ever see them again? Is it my fault? How long will I be here? And then we as foster parents struggle to answer those questions. And so many times in my house, I've held those kids as they cry themselves to sleep because I'm unable to provide them the answers to the questions they're searching for. They are overwhelmed with feelings and emotions that they can't simply process. They are scared, they're confused, they're full of anxiety. It's a traumatic time for them. And so many of these kids have come into foster care. They are suffering from issues of mental health. Let's talk about COVID right now during this time. I am far more concerned about the mental health risks for children today than I am of any virus.
Mm-hmm.
These kids right now that are suffering from so much mental health, we're seeing a spike in child abuse during COVID. We're seeing a spike in human trafficking during this time. We're seeing a spike in suicide. We're seeing a spike in children on antidepressants right now. It's very concerning. It's very concerning.
Right. And so much, we're all struggling. We're all struggling with it. And so obviously birth parents, that's heightened a lot of stuff going on in all the families. What do we do? Obviously, and then I think, the other thing that about the COVID reminding me is that we have, and I don't know how it is in Florida, but in Texas, it's caseworkers aren't necessarily laying eyes on kids. Teachers aren't laying eyes on kids. So there's a lot of stuff going unseen, unheard.
Right.
Compounding.
Right. And I'm hearing a lot of here, I'm actually here in Georgia, but I do work with agencies across country, and I'm hearing from agencies across the country and foster parents that as they are at home with these children, these for the past year, and still in so many states, the kids have been able to get the professional therapy and counseling sessions they need. They're unable to get the professional resources and support systems they need in school. They're unable to have those one-on-one important face-to-face visitations with their family members. And as a result, their anxiety levels have gone through the roof. And foster parents are struggling with that as well. I can't, they're saying to me, Dr. John, I'm struggling with my own issues while I keep my job, while I have food on the table, my own health concerns. And these kids who are in my house 24 hours a day without going to school, without visitations, without therapy, without counseling, and the caseworkers are unable to come to my house to help. It's been a very, very difficult time for foster care across the nation during this past year.
Right. What can we do? Obviously awareness is super important of, as you were talking about just the trauma of just moving into a home of people that you don't know. I just think about my first day at summer camp, when I was, in 3rd, 4th grade, just how scared that was, and it was well researched and we knew it was a safe place and all that kind of stuff, but just sleeping in the same room with people you don't know, that's the only kind of, reference I have really is going away to camp when I was very young and just remembering, does anybody know I'm special here? And I think that's a really good point. And I'm remembering the first nights that my daughters came and how scary it is. And we have to remember that as foster parents, because sometimes we think we can have this, we are saving somebody or doing something for somebody. And while that is a good thing to think about that, it's, I don't know, it can make us a little bit not maybe we're not so sensitive to what they're feeling if we're thinking in that way.
Yeah, it took me a while to recognize that, again, these kids don't want to be in my house.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I can provide everything that they need. But at the end of the day, it's a very frightening time. So for us as foster parents, we need to have a tremendous amount of patience, compassion, understanding for this. Recognize this is going to take time for this child to appreciate the fact that, hey, maybe these people aren't going to hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe these people are not going to scream and yell at me. Maybe I'm going to be okay. It's a different family, but I might be okay here. That takes time. And for those children who have suffered so many issues of trust and attachment, it's going to take a lot longer, a lot longer. Unlike us going to summer camp, for many of these children, they're removed suddenly without any explanation whatsoever and thrust into a strange home by a stranger, by sometimes even with the police, late at night. With no answers whatsoever. When we went to summer camp, our mom and dad dropped us off and said, "We'll see you in a week."
Yeah. That's
Big
right. No,
difference
it's a terrible example, but it was the only time I could remember spending the night away, like with total strangers, and
Right.
just going, and mom and dad weren't there, when I was really young. So, I mean, I always think of foster care, like and adoption, like it's adoption. My husband was adopted in 1969 as 6-week-old baby. So obviously he spent some time in foster care, but very limited. And you always think of that, and maybe that's the way in 1969, that's the way it's presented, but it's such a beautiful thing. We couldn't have children, and then we chose you, and there's all this hoopla, around that. But as we got older and my husband started to kind of dig into his own thoughts and understanding his own trauma, he began to realize, like, while I am so grateful, and it's a quandary that adoptees can be in, this
Right.
this tension between gratitude and grief, and so I think it is a beautiful thing, and kind of a beauty from ashes type scenario, but it's not the first choice. It never was the first choice.
Adoption's a loss.
Yeah.
Adoption is a loss of a family.
Mm-hmm.
Adoption is a loss of family identity, sometimes a loss of cultural beliefs. Sure. And what many don't recognize or appreciate is 65% of adoptive mothers. Now, this is something that's going to startle people, but 65% of adoptive mothers experience something known as post-adoption depression syndrome. Just because a child is adopted doesn't mean it's a happy ending ever after. So many times that's not the case.
Yeah.
Post-adoption depression syndrome happens for not only the child, but for the adoptive parent as well.
I guess we're grieving. It's a grief of expectations, maybe.
It can be that. It can be that. Sometimes a child, the adoption might not be what they expected. And the child might be struggling with. As the older the child gets, they may be struggling with the fact that maybe again, it's a loss. They have lost their mother and their father. That is gone. That part of their part of their life is gone, and many times they may grieve that. They also might feel guilty as they get older because they may feel that they did something wrong or they could have done something different. And so that really changes the dynamics in the house during this adoption time. When the honeymoon period is over, so to speak, and the emotions start coming up and the questions start coming forward, that places anxiety and stress on everybody in the family.
Yeah. Since we are talking about mental health, can we kind of sit there for a little bit? Because I think that is, many of the people listening are mothers, and I do, there's when your focus and your energy during foster care is, the trial, and there's this and there's that, there's all these things, right? And then it just kind of, like you said, stops kind of to a halt, like a rapid halt. And so what are some of those symptoms? Like what would some of those symptoms be because I'm sure attachment is a big piece of it, right? We've talked about
Sure. And
that
are
a
you
lot
talking,
on the podcast.
are you talking about for the foster parent or for
Yeah,
the
the
child?
foster and adoptive parent. I mean, for both, really. But I had
Well,
never heard it. What you called it? Tell me what you called that again.
post-adoption depression syndrome, PADS, post-adoption depression syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Now foster parents, we did a study here at the Foster Care Institute a few years back. We surveyed 5,000 plus foster parents, and we asked them, why are you quitting? Most foster parents, the majority, quit after about 18 months.
Mm.
And I keep hearing over and over again, Dr. John, it's because they feel they don't get the support when they are grieving when a child has left their home. Because so many foster parents, when these children come into our home, we provide them the unconditional love that they need. We love them like part of our family. And when they go, wherever they might be go, whether it's reunification or adoption or transitioning out, whatever it might be, that's a time of grief and loss for foster parents because it's like losing a member of your own family. Plus, there's issues of burnout and stress foster parents experience. And it's, to me, 60 plus kids, I've had as many as 11 in this house at the same time. It's been the hardest thing I've ever done. Most rewarding thing, make no mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Every child's maybe a better person, but it has been tough.
Mm-hmm.
And then foster parents experience something known as secondary traumatic stress, compassion fatigue.
I just talked about that on my Mother's Day podcast this week.
There you go. Right. So there's a number of reasons why foster parents and it's important to recognize this. Foster parenting is a very unique lifestyle that our friends and family members will never truly appreciate or understand.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, when these children are in our house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, children who have issues of attachment, may have anger management issues, eating disorders, issues of trust, and a number of other anxieties and disorders, that can be very challenging, very tough. And our friends and family members will never truly appreciate what that's like to live with these children. And on top of that, the feelings of grief and loss, the feelings of compassion fatigue, the feelings of burnout and stress. We can't go out to the movies on a whim. We can't go shopping whenever we want to go shopping. It's not out to dinner with our spouse, a couple times a week. It's a different lifestyle that our friends and family members will never truly appreciate or understand. In fact, so many the people that we know, our friends, will look at us and think, what are they doing? Why are they doing that? They've got to be a little bit crazy. But here's the truth. You do have to be a little bit crazy to be a foster parent. Not a normal lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting because that was a new term for me. I mean, I've heard of like compassion fatigue, but calling it secondary post-traumatic stress, I think is that what you just said?
Secondary traumatic stress. Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. So that was it was very comforting for me to read that the other day. I had read that in a book, and because you can beat yourself up for, sure. I did do, like, well, this is what I want to do. This is what I signed up for. This, why am I struggling? And that makes matters worse.
The symptoms are very similar to PTSD. The difference is the experience. And many foster parents don't recognize that they're going through compassion fatigue. I didn't recognize it. Yeah, I've been there. I've been burned out. My wife's been burned out. We've experienced grief and loss. We've experienced stress. There's been times we've questioned the system, questioned why we do this, and frustrated with the agency, frustrated with the caseworker, the birth parents. Those are all normal experiences. Again, that our friends and family members, those closest to us, really can't appreciate. Therefore, foster parents suffer from a lack of support. The only support they really can get is from people who have gone through it, other foster parents. That's why I'm so adamant that foster parents attach themselves to some type of support group, a foster parent support group, an adoption support group, a foster parent association, whatever it might be.
So when we're experiencing compassion fatigue, that makes it a lot more difficult to meet the needs of our kids that are in our care.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
So we got to fuel up ourselves.
I don't know how often I say this, but I tell foster parents almost on a daily basis, if you can't care for yourself, you can't care for these children. You've got to take care of yourself first. in order to take care of these children.
And what are some ways you recommend to do that? Obviously, find support groups.
Support groups, give yourself 5 minutes a day, whether it's locking yourself in a closet for 5 minutes for prayer or for devotion or for meditation or just to listen to your favorite song or have a cup of coffee, to make sure that you use respite care, to make sure that your marriage is healthy, to find a support system. There are many ways. We talk a lot about that in the book, The Foster Care Survival Guide. Those are just a few of the things that foster parents can do.
And where can we find the on the Foster Care Survival Guide?
Oh, you can find all my books at the Foster Care Institute bookstore.
Okay, good. That's good to know. Okay, so talking about the mental health of us foster parents, adoptive parents, we have to take care of ourselves. Obviously, if we can't take care of ourselves, ourselves
and our marriage.
Well. Good point.
Right.
And then, so what are so we've talked about a little bit about COVID, and I mean, we already have kids that are coming into care with lots of mental health issues. And so how can we recognize the signs of that? When do we know we need support? When do we know we need help? I mean, obviously we all need help all the time. I mean, I don't see how anybody doesn't need help when you move through this process.
Absolutely right. And, I often remind myself that when my air conditioning breaks, I'm not an AC guy. I'm calling a professional. When I have a toothache, I'm calling a professional. When my child is sick, I'm going to a doctor. It's okay to call a professional therapist and counselor as well when we're struggling with issues. Children in foster care, we have to remember, foster parents, these children need unconditional love, but for so many of these children, love is not going to fix everything. It's not a magic wand where everything goes away. So foster parents, we have to make sure that our children at home are getting the professional therapy and counseling sessions that they need that we might not be able to provide ourselves. And that might include family counseling sessions or family therapy sessions as well.
Like where we all go in together, not just the child, but the whole family, the whole family dynamics.
Right. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes. And we also have to remember, if we have biological children of our own biological children could be experiencing feelings of grief and loss when their foster siblings leave, or they might be experiencing compassion fatigue as well, or they might be burned out too from being a foster sibling. Now, sometimes you've got to take a break and give and focus on your own family.
Yeah, that's a really good point, to do that. And that can be really conflicting, I'm sure, because sometimes I think to myself, I've thought, well, my son is strong. My sons, they, we all signed up to do this together, and we kind of have to, at some point you do have to push through, but that's a really good point, to stay mindful of everybody's mental health, all of the caregivers, and they are caregivers for sure.
They are. And we also have to remember that as foster families, every placement is not going to be a perfect placement for our own home. When the phone call comes, I have a list of questions because I have to determine quickly, is my family a good fit for this child? Is my child a good fit? Is that child a good fit for my family? Can we provide the professional support and resources this child needs? Is this a good time for my family as well?
That's a great point. So you have a list. So when you get the call, you go through, and sometimes you don't get a lot of answers on that. That's been my experience, but.
Right. Oh, so true.
Yeah.
So true. Absolutely right.
You just kind of have to go through that. Okay. Well, I'm thinking, one of the things you mentioned earlier was the suicide rate. I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but my father committed suicide in 2015. It's very, very obviously painful, traumatic situation, and so that's something that's very tender to my heart. And thankfully, there was a shift in my dad that my brothers and I were quickly aware of, and I believe there's, without getting into it, there was kind of a perfect storm. Some medications weren't right, just some different things that had gone on, but I can't even imagine the death of a child in that way. You know, this was my father, and I was able to, through God's help, really to come to terms and make my brothers and I together make sense of the whole thing. But can you share some insight? I don't have a lot of insight on the teenage suicide rates right now, or what's going on in relation to COVID.
Well, before COVID, teenage suicide was on the rise. During COVID, it's even higher. And much of it is driven by social media, which is the disconnection of human relationships, you know, the one-on-one relationships. And then you throw in the foster care aspect of it. So children in foster care, you know, they have no control of their lives. They don't have control of being taken away from their parents, and sometimes even their siblings. They don't have control of being taken away from their house, their home, their pets, their toys, their school, their friends. They don't have control of being placed in the home they're at. They don't have control of court. They don't have control of nothing. The only thing they have control of is going online and creating a persona they want to be. So many of them go online to do that. And they also go online looking for one thing, and that is for love, for acceptance, because you know they are searching for that. That's where the human predators come in and target them for human trafficking. But sometimes these kids are going online, and you know, and they're suffering issues of trust, issues of attachment, issues of relationships, issues of worth. And there are many sites online that are pro-suicide sites that can teach a child how to commit suicide and encourage them to do so. You know, and for some of these kids, you know, there's a rash of maybe 2 years ago, a rash of children going online from foster care and streaming their suicides online. And for them, they were getting the attention that they were seeking. You know, someone pay attention to me, please pay attention to me, please pay attention to me. If I do this, you know, someone will pay attention to me, someone will watch me. Maybe I'll be important for a few moments. You know, I don't think children recognize today the finality of suicide,
Right.
the finality of it. They had that they don't have that worth. It's again, and that it's all risen. The rise of suicides in teenagers has risen over the last several years. And in COVID, I believe I've read several statistics which stated that 1 out of 4 teenagers today during this year of COVID have contemplated suicide, which to me is staggering.
Wow.
And yep, staggering.
And it's a
I go back to
seed. It's like a seed that's planted, you know, and then every time you give it attention, it's like growing and growing and growing.
Right. And I don't think we as a nation thought out in March of 2020 the mental health risks and dangers we are placing our children with when we shut them off from every connection with human beings and told these children, if you touch your mother or your grandmother, or you give them a hug, you could kill them.
Yeah.
We have not thought this out, and we are going to see a generation of children with tremendous issues of self-worth, and children on antidepressants, a whole generation on antidepressants. And it's
you know, we had my husband had COVID back in November, and so, you know, we had to stay home from school, and the girls had to stay over, and one of our friends invited us over at the very end of our quarantine. And on the way, you know, I am not a fear monger around germs and stuff like that. Doesn't really freak me out, but so I don't feel like I played into it too much, at least in our 4 walls here. But on the way there, my girls said, are you sure we can go over? Aren't they afraid of us? And that really was telling to me, you know, aren't they afraid of us? I said, no, they're not afraid of us, you know, but it's like we've shifted culture.
Well, look at it this way. My wife was actually saying to me just yesterday, we can't keep our young kids to keep a bow in their hair for 5 minutes. Yet these little 4 and 5-year-old children are not taking their masks off because they have been filled with so much fear about doing so.
Yeah. Scary.
Disturbing. Yeah, it is frightening.
Yeah. Do you have, I mean, this is such a touchy subject, but you talked about the antidepressants. Do you have statistics on how many of our kids in care are on psychotropic drugs or
I can tell you this, children in foster care are heavily medicated, over
yeah.
medicated with psychotropic drugs.
Mm-hmm.
As they go from one home to the next home, to the next home, to the next home, multiple displacement, and one doctor to the next, to the next, to the next.
Mm-hmm.
They're often given one prescription and another prescription, and another prescription,
Mm-hmm.
and they are quickly over medicated
Mm-hmm.
with psychotropic drugs. It's very common for children in foster care.
Yeah.
I can think of some of the kids in my home have come with 7, 8, 9 different psychotropic medications, sometimes just to sedate them and keep them quiet in a corner.
Yeah. I recently watched a mother talk, giving her testimony about her two boys being misdiagnosed with ADHD and maybe bipolar and being medicated for over 5 years. And when she went back and approached the psychiatrist, the answer was, we just don't have time to dig into, we have 15-minute visits, doctor visits, and she said, well, I'm lucky because I had 30 minutes because I had two boys. But she was very angry and she was upset because they were misdiagnosed and medicated. And like, what can we do as foster? I mean, I know when we have these behavior issues that are so scary and so, it's a lot fear driven, right? So
Yes.
what can we do as parents, whether we're foster parents, adoptive parents, or whatever? I have my own issues with the medication because I tend to blame my dad's death on a doctor that was medicating my dad inappropriately. And so that's my own personal journey. But what are some questions, like, as foster parents, what are our rights? How can we speak up and for our children in these situations?
You mentioned something important there. As foster parents, we do have rights. We have a training webinar at the Foster Care Institute, Rights and Responsibilities of Foster Parents. We do have rights, and we need to recognize what those rights are. I'm not going to go into it now, but we need to recognize what those rights are. My wife's a doctor of nutrition, naturopathic medicines.
Mm-hmm.
We look at healing the child through naturopathic ways. So I think back to this 17-year-old teenager that came to our house with 9 psychotropic drugs. We got him down to 2. It's like he blossomed. He was like like something out of cocoon, a butterfly opening up and blossoming is something beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
He was so sedated. And we got
Yeah.
him down to 2. He just opened up to something beautiful. There are other forms of therapy that I support: play therapy, animal therapy, music therapy, art therapy. Those are all therapies you can do in your home. Again, you can do all the research. We talk about that in the book, The Foster Care Survival Guide, as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not anti-medication. Sometimes these children do need to be on different
Mm-hmm.
kinds of medication. But at the same time, we as foster parents have to recognize we might be the only advocate for this child.
Yeah.
So we need to do our due diligence. We need to do the research. We need to ask the questions of our doctors. We need to make sure that what is being prescribed from the previous doctor is consistent with what the child should be on. At the same time, we need to be doing all of that while working with our caseworker. If we're going to place a child on their medication, we got to get approval by the doctor and the caseworker. Or if we're going to remove a child from medication, again, we need to work with our caseworker on that as well, because we don't want false accusations or allegations come back on us as foster parents. It's part of protecting ourselves as foster parents.
Right. Absolutely. That's great to hear that you were able to do that. And I'm a big proponent of that technique and there are so many, there are so many therapies. And unfortunately, and this is how it is in my area, it is challenging to find doctors. I mean, you're not going to find a functional medicine doctor or a naturopath on Medicaid. I mean, just not going to find,
Right.
that. So, and being able to choose as foster parents, do we have the right to choose the doctor? I mean, I know we are medical consenters, but can we choose doctors even if we choose to pay out of pocket and see other kind, or is it just depends on the case?
And the case, as well as the area of the country you live in as well. 50 different states means there's 50 different ways of doing foster care, and every agency also has its own different policies and practices and procedures as well. So as foster parents, we need to find that information out ourselves. You know, what
Mhm.
state are we living in? What agency are we working with? What is a particular case for that child? You know, it's
Yeah.
going to differ. It's
Yeah.
going to differ to be sure.
That's great. Well, that's encouraging. That's great. Okay, so this was all great information. I have a feeling I could go on with hours for you, but there's something very intriguing I read about you as I was doing some research. You
Sure.
have a really neat family. I saw some video of you and your wife, and I know you said your wife's Australian.
Right.
I just was Googling your name, and some videos showed up. One particular one was on Wife Swap, which is a show. Where did this come from? Foster parent wife swap. Were you foster parents at the
Well,
time?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a great
You know,
story.
we have been asked, you know, I guess you look at it this way. She's from Australia. He's from the north of the United States. They're living in the deep south. They got a colorful family. He worked in professional wrestling for a while. They live on a tropical island. They have adopted kids, all different colors, da 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 da, so much more. They must have an interesting story. So we have been content reality shows left, right, center for years. And when Weisswaf contacted us, I said, "No way! You should be embarrassed. Look at your name. And no way in the world. It's an awful show." They said, "No, no, no. We've changed our network. We've changed our focus. We want to focus on issues of social justice and awareness." So my wife and I put to prayer, and we thought, well, if we can show foster care and adoption in a positive light, if we can show what a foster care family and an adoptive family in 2000 in the 21st century looks like, we can show that, you know, love knows no color. If we can show that, let's give it a shot. And it was interesting.
Yeah. You know
It was a-
what? It was actually, I just saw clips
yeah.
on YouTube, but it was very heartfelt. It was very touching. A couple of episodes that I saw your wife really, you know what I saw? I saw love. I
Yeah.
saw
Yeah.
love. I saw a mom teach your did your daughter's hair, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that was so sweet. And then, I thought it was really unique, and I didn't ever watch that series.
Neither
But
had I.
yeah, but after I found that after I had watched your TED Talks and kind of felt like I knew a little bit about you. And so when I watched those clips, I could see your purpose. And because I think I think your family did reflect love. And I thought that was really neat. So I think those are worth watching.
Thank you. Thank you again. Nothing I really expected or ever wanted to do or considered.
Yeah.
Um,
How
yeah,
long did you have to live apart? Just some behind the scenes stuff. I'm
about
curious.
about a week.
Okay. Was that challenging?
Uh, you know, um, my kids were over it in maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It
Where's
wasn't.
mom?
Uh, my wife's family's kids didn't want her to leave.
Hmm.
In fact, if you watch the episode, the girl says, you know, "I don't want my mom to come back. I want you to stay." Um, I don't think our person was ready for our lifestyle.
Yes, you have a
Uh,
unique lifestyle.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like
And, you know, you gotta really, you know, if you're gonna come to our house, buckle up and hold on because it's kids, 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 and it's we don't stop, and we don't stop.
yeah.
Um,
And you don't have internet, right? You don't have internet or something. There was something about internet or Wi-Fi or something. I can't remember
that's right.
exactly.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So, and that was very surprising because they were making movies on the internet or something. It's been a while since I watched it, but it was very interesting. It was like you guys were paired like night and day.
Yeah,
But I
it was.
felt like
It was.
I felt like everybody really benefited from it, or they made it look like that anyway.
I hope so. I hope
Yeah.
so. Again, it's another adventure my wife and I were on. We just think of these as continuing adventures, and we
Yeah.
try to bring awareness.
Yeah.
Because I believe awareness equals advocacy. Not everybody can be a foster parent.
Yeah.
Hardest thing I've done. Again, most rewarding thing. But at the same time, I firmly believe everybody can help a child in crisis in some way.
Yeah.
And we've got 425,000 children in foster care. Child abuse spiking during COVID, human trafficking spiking during COVID, more children flooding over the border, unaccompanied minors flooding over the border during this new presidential administration that has different standards of the border. There's a need right now that is stronger than ever, which means there are children in need, children in crisis in every single community. So whereas everybody cannot be a foster parent, everybody can help a child in some way where they live. And that's what I try to do. I want to bring awareness to these issues because so everybody can become an advocate in some way.
Right. We can do things like CASA, or we can mentor, or we can bring dinner to families who receive new placements, or families that are just struggling in any way,
Right. Or backpacks filled with hygiene items or school supplies. We can provide school suitcases for the youth who age out or when they move to another home. So many different ways.
Yeah. I remember when we first got our placement, and as a mom, who had 3 children, they were, our churches always, when you have a child, churches show up with food, right? They would bring food, and they would, they're just always checking on you and, come sit, let you take naps, things like that. Well, when you have a foster care, a new placement, nobody thinks about that kind of stuff, or at least they didn't when I started this. And so, it's hard to ask for help, but I had close enough friends that I began to say, I need help, and teaching people how to help you is important, because what I found is that my friends really did want to help. They just didn't know what to do,
Right. And you touched on something important there, church. One of my books is called The Church and Foster Care. And I believe the next great mission for today's people of faith and today's faith-based organizations and churches, whatever faith it might be, the next great mission field is the foster care ministry, is the foster care outreach program.
Mm-hmm.
And churches have an opportunity right now to create their own outreach program, their own ministry, where people can come together and help these children in crisis and help the foster parents and also help the birth parents who are struggling with their own issues, their own anxiety, their own trauma that may be unresolved for them, who are all children of God.
Yeah, you're right. And can I ask you, since you've been in this for a lot longer than I have, because in just my 6 years of being involved in foster care, I have already seen a tremendous growth or spike in people understanding that concept. Are you seeing that?
There's a movement going on right now.
Yeah.
There's a movement going on right now in our nation. I texted 3 different people today about this. There's a movement going on right now in today's faith-based church and organization, people of faith. And it's a wonderful thing to see. Because quite frankly, the government can't do it by itself.
Right. Wasn't their job, really. It's our job.
Right. You're right. You're right. And again, this is why I wrote the book, The Church and Foster Care. There's a movement going on, and it's exciting to see. It's exciting to see.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to be done, though. We've only just begun.
Yeah, and it's so rewarding. I mean, it is hard. I got the compassion fatigue right here. It's hard, but somebody said, I think I said this. Oh, I can quote myself. I think I told my husband this when we were in the thick of it. I said, it's hard, but hard's not bad. Hard's just hard. Yeah. It's just hard, and it's grown me up a lot. And I'm sure it's grown you and your wife up too.
Every child's going to be a better person in some way.
Yeah, that's what it does. So, okay, as we're closing out, how can we find you again? Let them know exactly what is it, where do we find your books? Where do we find your web? Tell me, give all that insight real quick, and I'll make sure it's in the show
thanks.
notes.
I'm on social media, Dr. John DeGarmo, foster care expert, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. The Foster Care Institute is where you can find all my books, my podcasts, my videos, my articles, training resources, or if you just can't find the Foster Care Institute, just type in online Dr. John DeGarmo, foster care expert. All of that will come up. At the Foster Care Institute, we have, again, so much resources, not only for foster parents and adoptive parents, but for parenting in general. A lot of parenting resources there as well.
Okay. And that's not just local. That would be for
Global.
anyone. Global.
Yes.
Wow.
Right.
That's exciting. And watch the wife swap videos. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
and you've only mentioned that. There's so many other things out there. You don't even, I'm so glad you haven't touched on those as well.
Well, it was very moving. I recommend it. So that was good. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the time that you spent this evening. And man, I'd love we'll catch up another time. And
yeah, let's do it.
Okay. And you're doing good work. Thank you for doing that.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And for all of you listeners, thank you for joining us tonight. I hope that, this is Foster Care Awareness Month. So like, I'm just going to challenge everybody, like, maybe you and your partner, your spouse, maybe bringing a kid into your home is not right for you right now. Like, I totally get that. And you know what? You do have to be able to take care of yourself before you can take care of someone else. But there are so many things that you can do. And I've told this story before, but I had talking about teaching my friends how they can help me. I had a friend named Mary, and Mary was so interested in what we were doing. And so I said, Mary, I could really use you as respite care. And so, but this is what you have to do. You have to take some trauma classes and do all this. Okay, she signed up, she did it. And she just attached so quickly to my now 8-year-old daughter. And I remember one night when my husband and I were leaving, my daughter jumped up in his arms, and she said, I love you, Daddy. I have 2 mamas and 2 daddies and 1 Miss Mary. And I thought, like, how special is that? And when I told her that, like, it touched her, and to be the 1 Miss Mary. And so I think that's like a great way that you can help support a foster family by doing respite or babysitting. And there is a little work involved, but it's definitely worth it. So don't forget, like and subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review, and we'll see you next week. Mama's well. Yes, she is.